Okay, so this one is going to be taking us that next level where we already know how to do some of our modeling and we know how to turn things into 3D and how to modify things, but we haven't really covered how to do things in precise measurements. So what we're going to do is make sure that we're measuring everything in a unit that is familiar to us. So sometimes the default for SketchUp can be feet and inches, which is not something that's as familiar for most of us. If I go to my hamburger menu here and select new, all that will do, and you'll see, is that it will load up a blank world that we've already been playing in. Okay, it hasn't actually given us the chance to change any of our units of measurement. If I go onto my home section, that will show any of my previous work I've done, just like the house task you've been seeing in the other movies. But now if we click create new on the drop down there, we can select which unit of measurement. Now, the task that you're going to be working your way up to is modelling a house. So you might as well pick meters. Millimeters will just mean that all of your numbers you have to type in are huge. So we want to try and avoid that. So we're going to go into meters here. And now that is going to load up the world familiar to us, but it'll be using meters as the unit of measurement. So in order to start creating shapes of a certain size or dimension, I'll start off with a simple line. So if I was to click here, and I start dragging, so I've left clicked and let go, so I haven't got to hold my left mouse button down at the moment, and I'm sort of saying, oh, I guess which direction I want it to extend along. But if you keep your eye on the lower right of my screen, just around here, these numbers are changing as I'm moving my mouse around. Now that's fine, I can move it and try and be accurate, but the other thing I can do is while I've selected my line or I've started drawing it, I can just type in 4 on my keyboard and press enter, and that will make that exactly 4 meters long. All right, the same happens with rectangles. If I was to click and start dragging out, you can see it's got a couple of different measurements. So if I was to type 4, 2 and enter, then what that's done is it's made something that is along those measurements of 4 by 2. So what we can do here is we can use our measuring tape just to double check everything here. So if I was to zoom back in and I click on one endpoint and I click on the other, it tells me when it snaps that it's exactly 4 meters. If I was to escape off that and I click here and hover there, it's 2 meters. And then if I was to shift my perspective and I go over on this side, it's telling me it's 4 meters. So what that tells me here is that when we type in our measurements for this rectangle, the first number actually reflects along this red axis and the second number reflects along the green axis. So when I type this in, if you thought, oh, that seems a bit strange, it's shot off to the side, then it'll look a little bit more to scale when we look directly up the top. Remembering that if we're looking at it from an angle from the side, things can look a little bit skewed out as if it's not actually mapping to the 2x4. Look directly on top of it will normally clarify things a little bit for you. So that's a little bit of how we can do some measurements. If I wanted to create another line that was going straight up into the sky, again, endpoint here, I've got the blue, so I know I'm going up on the blue axis, and if I wanted it to be 3 meters up, I could type, or actually we'll go 3.5. This time I'll type 3.5 on my keyboard and press enter, and now that line is exactly 3.5 meters high. All right, and if you look at that, this is where having the lady there gives you a bit of perspective. That her height, we can now check what that is, because it looks like, well, there's an average height person, 3.5 meters high, seems about right. But let's actually see if we can measure her height. So if we click on, again, our tape measure, if we're on the lower part of the lady's foot and we hover up to about her head, it's saying she's about 1.57. All right, so that's the height of her. And so this should be more than double her height, which it is. All right, so that's how to do some of your more precise drawings and constructions. And the same deal works with, I don't want that one, let's go on to our rectangle. Same thing works with things like circles, that if we click and as we drag out, it's giving us a radius this time. So if I want a radius of 5 and I press enter, then it's going to give me exactly that. If I want a radius of 5, but I want it facing upwards instead, then all that I need to change is exactly where I'm facing here. All right, so again, type in 5 and enter. Now, that looks huge, but that is just because we're dealing with 3D space and it actually placed it really close to us. By the time we zoom out and move around a little bit, you can see that actually is in the same spot. So if you want a little bit more control about where it exactly places your circle or your rectangle, then for example I might want it to be over this side instead. One option could be if I place a line from here, and I'll extend it up a little bit and press escape. We can check, yeah, okay, we might want the circle to be going from this point here, that now when I draw it, I could be back similar spot to where I was before, but this time I start on this endpoint, and it's going to do that flat now, so I'm going to rotate down so I'm facing downwards a bit more, and it still wants to do that, and that's not ideal. So what we're going to do is escape, we'll start at a lower angle, and then if we click, now it's doing it along the right way for us. And if I go 5 and enter, then it's actually drawing it correctly. Okay, it's drawing it in more of an accurate spot for where we want. So the main part of this movie has just really been trying to show you that you can use aspects of your tape measure to get accuracy with, also you can measure and see how big some areas of your world are, and you can also start creating lines and rectangles and circles by left clicking and releasing, and then you can type in the numbers and press enter and it'll lock that into place. So it's worth playing around with, because if you want accuracy with anything, especially architectural constructions, you need to try and get them as close as possible to reality. The last little thing that I'll show you here, and it's just an add-on to this really, is that we can also do, we can record the dimensions of something. So if I was to, I'll show you that there again, this one, dimensions. If I was to click on this corner and then click on this corner here, then I can drag off as far as I want, but I'll do it so it's nice and close. And now that actually stays there, so that we can leave that there, which can be useful if this is going to be a plan for something that we're actually trying to construct later on. So it tells me a permanent reminder that's 4 meters there, and the same tool I could do from there to here and drag it out, and left click, and 2 meters. So again, nice handy little feature, allows you to be more specific with what you're doing.